I have for a long time believed that words have power. And so what we typically call bad language is just powerful language. And when it's overused, it becomes applying a powerful thing to an innocuous conversation, right? Uh, so I would always, my sister once asked me, like, when should I use the F bomb? I said, well, I can't tell you exactly when to use it, but make sure that you put it on like a spice. Often just a little bit will do.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of my perspective too, is like it means something. So it's a little artificial to leave the extreme part of our language off the table
Hmm.
all the time.
Yep.
But if you overuse it, then it stops having its meaning.
Hmm.
Anyway.
Well, and you do a disservice to the language itself, right? So on one hand, you rob something that should be very powerful of the power that it should have. On the other hand, you rob the rest of the language that you're trying to use, the nuances, the subtlety of language. You lose the shades of meaning that you could articulate because you've just been dropping in again what should be powerful words into a conversation that calls for more nuance and more shades of gray, perhaps. And so it disservices the language on both sides, right? You don't get the chance to exercise subtle language, and then powerful language is likewise robbed of its power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And sometimes people don't actually understand you
Hmm.
um,
Side a little
until
closer.
until you actually go into that part of the vocabulary.
Using stronger language.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like some people don't understand what you're saying at all until you start using profanity.
Interesting. Well, say more about that. What do you mean they don't understand what you're saying? They don't understand
They
if
don't
you're
take
serious?
well, I guess I'm not exactly sure, but they don't take you seriously.
Oh,
Like
really?
the matter, the substance of the words you're saying have less effect than the way in which they're said.
Okay.
So yeah,
Are you saying that with certain groups of people, you would actually have to start dropping in our strongest language just to get them to listen?
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Hmm. And yeah, and it's your body language too
Uh-huh.
has a lot to do with it sometimes.
Hmm.
Like you can tell someone something very matter of factly in a calm way,
Right.
and they don't get it. But you say the exact same thing, except you're screaming at them
Right. Right.
and using your hands,
Right.
pointing the finger and things like that. Like
Hmm.
that's when they start to understand it. Like, I don't know why the first 10 minutes of my conversation just went completely over their head.
Right. Right. Yeah. I wonder if the brain could be deadened in a certain way
As
that
soon
it
as I
just
start
doesn't
yelling
receive
at
it.
you,
Uh-huh.
then you finally get the idea that I'm serious.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So hence drill sergeants with 18-year-old, 17 and 18-year-old men, right? We're yelling all the time. The theory is that's what 17 and 18-year-old men are actually responsive to.
I think that's actually a little different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, like, drill sergeants yell at you in order to overload uh, your senses,
Okay.
stress you out.
Okay.
A lot of times, it really has less to do with what they're telling you,
Hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's to freak you out and cause you to like make impulsive decisions or something like that. Or can he remember what he's supposed to do when someone's screaming at him? Like
Uh-huh.
artificially induce this stressful scenario
Okay.
to test their ability to perform under stress. So like that's what drill sergeants are doing.
Okay.
But I'm talking about like I don't want to be like too stereotypical, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, but certain demographics of people are around emotionally unstable people that
Mm-hmm.
use vulgarity and profanity all the time.
Uh-huh.
So when they interact with someone that doesn't do that,
Okay.
they have a hard time understanding when they're serious and when they're not.
It actually sounds like a foreign language in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like if we're not dropping in the F bomb. Well, for them, it's not a bomb. It's just part of the language. It's our equivalent of or right? Yeah, we say the F bomb, but that's itself referring to a certain segment of society that believes that to say that word is something startling. You're talking about a segment of the population for whom it is just as common to say fuck as it is to say the.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when it comes to law enforcement, I mean, you guys can't be using that language, correct? So you just turn up the volume?
It depends.
Okay. It depends.
Like,
The
yeah,
body cam, not a body mic.
I try not to do that as much as I can,
Uh-huh.
but sometimes that's what people respond to.
Mm.
Like, as an example,
Yeah.
I almost never yell at people.
Mm-hmm.
Almost never.
Mm-hmm.
And even when the other person that I'm trying to talk to is really animated, really amped up, physically they're walking back and forth and using their hands to describe what's going on or whatever.
Okay.
I'm always very calm. Like, okay, yeah, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the example a couple days ago, talking to a lady, and I generally try to wait people out. And this lady, as soon as I showed up at her house, just started screaming at me
Huh.
about, you guys are harassing me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was in my own yard. My neighbors need to mind their own business.
Hmm.
On and on and on. It was probably like literally like 8 minutes. Something
Okay.
like that. I'm like, I understand. I'm just here because the neighbors called, so I'm here to make sure everything's okay.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she's like screaming, like face and eyes are red, using her hands to,
Yeah.
you know, and like, okay, you can't be in your yard yelling and screaming. You're causing a scene and disturbing the neighbors.
Okay.
And she just continued to yell and scream.
Uh-huh.
And I finally was like, you can't do this. I started yelling right back at her, and I put my
Uh-huh.
finger in her face and was like, you cannot be out in your yard yelling and screaming and disturbing the neighbors. That's a breach of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
So cut your shit. And I actually said that.
Right.
And I didn't use any language stronger than that.
Okay.
But like I got in her face and
Yep.
yelled and screamed right back at her like she had done to me for the first 10 minutes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately her mood changed.
Really?
She completely understood exactly what I meant.
Oh.
She didn't yell at me anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like, okay.
And you were able to leave the scene and leave her there. You didn't have to take her off
No.
site.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like the neighbors called because you're yelling and screaming.
Uh-huh.
You need to stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you stop, we will leave.
Right.
If you keep screaming at me and disturbing the peace of
Yeah.
your neighbors, you're going to go to jail.
Right.
You get it?
Right.
Okay.
Wow. Huh. So emotionally charged language was the only dialect of English she understood.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
I could have said the exact same thing in my calm speech. Like,
10 different
you need
times.
to tone it down and
Right.
stop using vulgarity.
Right.
You're going to go to jail.
Right.
She didn't get it until I yelled back at her in the same way that she was yelling at me.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if some people just go through their entire day, their entire lives with every conversation is at an 11 in some way, right? Emotion or impulse is at the upper extreme in every single instance.
I think it's like you said, it's like a foreign language. Like we're both speaking English, but you grew up speaking a totally different type of English than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand a lot more is being transferred through the body language and the type of English that's being used rather than the actual substance of the conversation.
Right.
Yeah. That might be what it is.
Yeah.
Reminds me of, have you seen those stereotypes of Midwesterners? How Midwesterners talk?
Probably.
There's a guy, Charlie Barons is his name, and he's from Wisconsin.
stuff. He's hilarious.
And he does like how Midwesterners do things. It's like we're just so polite to help you. It's like if it's not too much trouble to you, I'll lend my afternoon to help you with this project. It's like just over and above. And we have like a way of like taking forever to get to the point. It's like we'll tell you like how great you are, how wonderful your property is, and just say, hey, if it's not too much trouble to you, could you just put your dog on a leash? You know, like if it's not an inconvenience to stop inconvenience me, then we're great.
Right.
And so, but like the way that I grew up talking is so different from like, yeah, like East Coast or
Oh my
Southern.
gosh, yeah.
Like,
Like my yeah, I mean my aunts and extended family from New York. I mean it's crazy. We can be so blunt, right? Uh right. Why are you parking there? Like I barely understood what you said. Something about I think parking. You know what I mean? Yeah, don't be a knucklehead. You know that's.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I remember pulling up to the new, oh, I think it was LaGuardia. Yeah, so right in the middle of New York. I remember pulling up, and from literally 80 feet away, I could hear this traffic cop and this taxi driver having a um energetic discussion. And the cop, she was female, and she punctuated her point, whatever she was saying. I don't even know the substance of the argument, but she punctuated the end of all of her arguments with, and I'm not your problem and I'm not your woman. I was like, where, like, how did this conversation even begin? Right? I'm not your problem and I'm not your woman. Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah. And from 80 feet away, and you could just hear it clear as a bell. That would never happen in, yeah, Dayton,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oklahoma City, not in a million years. So, oh, did we introduce Jake?
We haven't.
Jacob Halsmer. Welcome to the show.
All right.
It's really good to have you here, man. I feel like I've been dropping hints about getting you on here for like 7 months at this point. I think it was in like early February where I just started floating the idea.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic. No, we're super excited. You have done more than anyone I know to think about preparedness for the worst case scenario than anyone I know. I know some cultures, prepper culture, even Mormon culture. Some folks I knew back in New England, maybe they had a basement full of supplies, right? Maybe they had water, maybe they had a ton of ammo stored up. But what I think you bring to the table is you've thought about these things, you've read about these things, you've put your money where your mouth is in certain ways, but you've also trained, right? So there's that. You've done the intellectual work too, as part of what you do. You've done the physical preparation. You've done some of the preparation of just, hey, yeah, I have a bug out bag. I have supplies stored here. I have a network of people that I can rely on. I have a place to go to, which I don't think we're not going to disclose that place here on the podcast. But anyway, to summarize, it seems that you've looked at facets of preparedness for a long time and in a really thorough way. What got you interested in this?
I don't.
What do you remember Y2K? Where you were, yeah, you and I are
Yeah.
about the same age. So yeah, so Y2K would have been when we were about like 10 or 11.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know any preppers back then.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Um,
That's when I first was introduced to them. I knew a few, and then I was growing up in New England, so we also read stories about a few people. They had sold their house, gotten like a bunker up in the like woods of Maine, just like hunkered down.
yeah. That's probably what most people think of when you use the word prepper,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Am I right? Is that what you guys think? The first
Yeah.
thing that comes to
Yeah,
your
that's
mind?
certainly the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. Like, well, okay, so Y2K. I didn't know anyone, is what I said earlier, but so my friend's cousin, we were at his house once. Would have been 1999, I guess. And he showed us the generator that his parents bought.
Uh-huh.
Like, why is this cool? Yeah, Y2K, unless in case the power goes out, then we can keep doing, electrical stuff.
Mm,
And I had no like understanding of what was going on.
sure.
But yeah, so like at that point, no one in my family or any other people that I had any connection to made any preparations at all for Y2K. Like,
Mhm.
it's probably not going to happen. It's a thing people talk about. Like, whatever. It didn't, yeah, that didn't cross my mind really too much.
Okay.
But I think that's probably how most people approach like potential disasters is like, well, it's probably not going to happen. So
Mm,
just keep doing my own thing. And
I'll chance it.
yeah. um, I don't know what, so like, how did I get into prepping?
Well, let's back up. You said crazy people in a bunker up in the woods is the first thing that we think of. I think that's true. What do you think we should have as an image of a prepper or what preparedness really looks like? Yeah.
Yeah, to me,
Does prepping have
there's,
some bad marketing going on for it?
I think so. I think it's getting better
Okay.
because it's starting to be more popular
Mm-hmm.
and it's starting to reach more mainstream and not be such a fringe idea, I
Okay.
guess. But to me, like prepping is just kind of bringing back home the natural abilities that we used to have.
Ah.
Like your true American is just someone who can take care of himself and provide what he needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's what humans have always done. Like I'm a person and I take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going way on back to the caveman days, but with the advent of society, then you start farming out to other people who have specialties
Sure.
and they provide services to you that you don't have the ability to do in such a specialized way.
Sure.
But the result of that is that you become vulnerable in those areas. So if you need that service, then you're dependent on this other person.
Mm.
So
When do you think I mean, we've been doing agriculture for what, like 13,000 years, 12,000 years, something along those lines. So let's say the advent of agriculture was the first time that, generally speaking, we stopped hunting and gathering in small groups and started saying, okay, you people go grow crops, and then you people are going to be good at fighting and getting more land to grow crops on, right? I believe that we started this specialization, I believe, a long time ago. But it's certainly true today that if you turned off electricity, most of most of the first world would have to deal with a population that had no idea how to survive, right?
mhm.
I don't know if that's as true of the first world of 1900 or the first world of 1800.
Yeah, I think like if you go back to 1914,
Mm-hmm.
that generation of people were way more capable of taking care of themselves.
Okay, yeah. So I guess that's my question. Where would you draw the line where we kind of went from one side of the specialization to the other side?
Oh,
1915, 1920?
um, I mean, even just within, think of the skill set that my dad has compared to the skill set that I have.
Okay.
He's just so much more diverse than I am.
Interesting.
So yeah, like how many times did he call a plumber or a mechanic or an
Mm-hmm.
electrician?
Mm-hmm.
Never. I can literally never think of a time that he called any of those people.
Right. Right.
Like, yeah, we had contractors come in to help for like big remodel type builds,
Sure.
but that was simply for like a manpower issue, not
Right.
necessarily
He
like
was hiring labor.
skills.
He was hiring labor, not knowledge.
Sort of, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't like, hey, I turn the hot water on and it's cold. I don't know what to do. So I
Right.
call a plumber.
Yep.
That never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was an issue like that, like he would figure out why it's that way and then
Mm-hmm.
fix it. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty simple thing.
Yep.
And like my grandfather and his generation, like they would it was that same thing even on a greater scale.
Hmm.
Like they would actually fabricate tools to solve problems
Uh-huh.
instead of just fixing tools that they had.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think like with each generation that the skill level just continues to decrease.
Hmm.
Specialization continues to increase.
Hmm. Society is sort of matching what happens in academia, where in order to get a doctorate, you have to specialize in a certain area. In order to continue postdoctoral research, you have to go deeper and deeper into that specialty. You look at today's society in America, in the modern day, right? We want to make clear distinctions here. And you see basically the same thing where people become increasingly specialized, but also increasingly ham fisted in areas outside their specialization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So preparedness is more than just I have a big basement and it's full of dried food. It's more than that.
I tend to like to say self-reliance
Self-reliance. Okay.
more than preparedness.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty similar, I guess. Um, the a couple different points I'd like to cover, I guess, and one of them it would be like the time is connected to this topic. Like a prepper, like you can't be prepared. You can't do everything by yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
can't be prepared. Like the specialization thing, you can't individually possess all of the skills and capabilities
Hmm.
to produce a society
Uh-huh.
unto yourself.
Uh-huh.
But what do you really need? Like, if the power goes out, if it's Y2K and the power goes out, what do you need? You need to be able to buy yourself time to figure out the next step,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're if there's a water contamination issue,
Mm-hmm.
you can't drink the water,
Mm-hmm.
are you gonna get dehydrated and die of dehydration because you have no water anywhere in the house,
Mm-hmm.
or decontamination issue gets fixed by the city
Mm-hmm.
or wherever it is that you get your water from?
Right.
So like preparedness would be, I've got a couple extra gallons of water here to buy myself some time to get through this lack of water
Okay.
issue,
Yep.
right? Um, so the other aspect of it is what issues do you have? Like I can afford to take some time to figure out this problem.
Okay.
Like the internet's down.
Okay.
Okay, you're not going to die because the internet's down, right?
Yeah.
So do I need to like prepare a secondary source of internet for my house?
Mm.
That's
Right.
probably not a super high priority.
Right. Do we all need Starlink? Probably not.
Yeah, but if someone starts running at you with a knife, how
Mm.
much time do you have to solve that problem?
Less than 2 seconds.
Probably just a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have a solution to that problem?
Mm.
Or is that going to be the end of your book? Right. So,
Whoa.
I guess the way that I sort of look at it
Yep.
is the types of issues that you don't have time to solve later.
Uh-huh.
Like, once the issue arrives, you need to have a solution to it now, or it's over. Those are the types of issues that you might want to consider having secondary plans for. And then as the issue becomes more and more time delayed,
Mm-hmm.
that allows you more time to solve that problem also.
Right.
So you can either push it farther towards the back burner
Mm-hmm.
or devote less time and money towards solving that problem
Uh-huh.
or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There are all sorts of eventualities that we could prepare for, right? We,
Yeah. And I think another point that I think should be discussed
Yeah.
is I tend to get a little weirded out by the prepper discussion sometimes
oh,
because it's like survival, 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 survival. Don't die, don't die. Well, that's not really the end goal, is it? Like we're gonna die. So the important part is to die well, right? And go be with Christ. That's the important part.
all right.
So of course, like I consider being prepared an important thing,
Yep.
but it's not the first thing. So that should just be kept in mind.
Mm.
Like the idea of over worshiping the body, I guess, can start to become a concern. Like, we're not going to sacrifice our entire lives just to preserve our life
Mm.
to make it a few weeks longer or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, you got to live too.
At a certain point, you have to have an existence worth living rather than just an existence. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And remember that just staying alive is not your primary focus.
Uh-huh.
Like staying faithful is your primary focus.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Every martyr has eventually gotten to the point where they have said, well, there's nothing more I can do to stay alive without compromising something even dearer to me than life.
Well, and I think there's also been saints at some point, like in earlier on in their lives, where they were actually like actively seeking out a source of martyrdom.
Mm.
And yeah, forgive me, I can't remember who that was,
Mm.
but and then at some point they realized like, oh, maybe I shouldn't actually be seeking this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a good way to go, but
Mm.
it sort of compromises the whole deal of looking for it.
Yeah.
Right.
um,
Right. Even martyrdom is a calling, not something we choose.
right.
Uh,
Yeah. So like prepping, there's the people that sell their house and move way off into the country and wear tinfoil hats and prepare for the polar shifts of the world or something like that.
right.
Like, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Like, it kind of bothers me when people like they totally compromise every aspect of their life to prepare for this very specific possible eventuality.
Right.
Like, what if it doesn't happen?
Mm.
What if
I think
something
there's
else?
actually a certain amount of there's probably the negative aspect of pride comes into it. I want to be more prepared than you, right?
Yeah, like I'm gonna be the one guy that survives and everybody else is gonna
Exactly.
die.
All you suckers.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
right and you were wrong.
They want to be I Am Legend.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like dude, you're not gonna do well if you're the only one left.
He didn't do very well.
No.
Yeah.
Um,
There is also the fact that if you get into almost any group that pursues a single interest, right? And that could be sports, that could be in academia, that could be 1,000 different things. But there tends to be a way in which the members drive each other to be a little bit more intense, a little bit more serious, a little bit more devoted to whatever it is that they're dedicated to, right? And that can be both a positive and a negative thing. It's just that we tend to look at those around us and emulate them and maybe push things just a little bit farther, right? And then that person sees us going a little farther. They say, well, I don't want to be, I don't want to lose status in this group. So I'm going to push myself a little bit farther. And again, that can be a really fruitful thing, right? And I think it leads to innovation. I think it leads to progress in a number of fields, but it can also lead to crazy.
yeah. Um, I don't look at prepping as like trying to divine the future and prepare for this specific thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The way I kind of look at it is just trying to bring home more skills that used to be common amongst men
Hmm.
so that I can take care of myself and take care of the people that God has given me responsibility for.
What do you think what are those core skills in your book?
So what are your objectives? Like food, water, shelter, security,
Mm-hmm.
right? So be able to do those things. And again, like in reference to time.
Mm.
So
Okay.
uh and it's just baby steps, right? Like you kind of brought this up earlier in that email. Like
Mm.
uh it can be so daunting to think of everything that you could possibly do to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Like arrival is never a thing, but there's always just little things you can do to improve your position.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, like, how much food do you have in your house right now?
Mm.
You have to go to the store every 2 days, or you're
Mm.
going to be super hungry. Maybe think about making it a week,
Uh-huh.
because how often do the food trucks come to the grocery store?
Mm.
And how desperate are things going to be if there's a snowstorm and the food truck doesn't get here? So, if you can buy your family another week, that gives you another 7 days to come up with a solution, whether it's communicating with other people in your community or it's the transit system getting the roads cleared so you can get the food truck to the store.
Right.
So it's little things like that. Like that's a great place to start. Like you're responsible for your family. So food, water, shelter, security. Do you have food in the house, or are you gonna starve to death in a day? Do you have water? So the water's running all the time, but if there's a contamination alert that comes out
Mm-hmm.
because something went wrong with the water system in the city, do you have some gallons of water so that you can drink and wash yourself for a few days until they get the issue sorted out? Like those are pretty simple things to do, and none of that really costs you a ton of money.
Mm.
But if you do those things, like you're already probably ahead of 50% of the society, right?
If you had a week's worth of water and a week's worth of food, you're in the top half.
Probably. I mean, I don't know the actual statistics, but
Time to get a poll going. Yeah. I mean, given the number of people that we know are living paycheck to paycheck, it seems only logical to assume that if you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's it's unlikely that you can go 2 weeks with just the supplies that you have in your own dwelling. Now that's a leap. I mean, I have no way of proving that, but that passes the sniff test for me. No.
yeah. Um, food, water, shelter. So if the power goes out, you gonna freeze to death in the wintertime, or do you have a way to heat your house without relying on the gas or electricity? There's a nice,
Got a list of friends who have a wood
nice little
stove.
fireplace right there.
I'm going. I'm going. I'm going over to their house.
Yeah, it's just it's little things. And another way, I heard it from Pat McNamara on one of his videos
Okay.
talking about like he's a big proponent of in the training space not having like standards like do X in Y amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
but like quantifying your performance based on where you are. And I'm gonna totally butcher the way he tries to put it, but like what are you comparing yourself to? So if you have this standard set,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a certain group of people that gets totally discouraged because there's this standard and it's so far away from where they're at, they think it's not achievable and they stop trying. And then there's this other part of the demographic that can very easily achieve the standard.
Okay.
And so they stop because they've achieved the standard.
Gotcha.
So both groups are stopping.
Mm-hmm.
Half of them have achieved the standard and the other half have not, but neither of them are actualizing their real potential for performance.
Mm.
Right. So the way he put it, which really resonated with me, was if you clone yourself today and then schedule a fight with your clone tomorrow, what are you going to do in the next 24 hours to prepare for that?
Hmm,
And
that's cool.
that's an easily achievable goal, right? It's like
Everyone has
performance.
an answer to that question, or could come up with
there's
an
always
answer.
something you can do, right?
Right.
Like, I'm going to go to bed an hour early so that I have an hour extra rest. Or I'm going to, but you know, whatever the fight's going to be, who knows? If you schedule it like a month out, now I'm going to go to the gym every day
Right.
to prepare for that because I can actually realize those results sooner
Yep.
in that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's gonna be something you can do between today and tomorrow to make yourself more prepared for that fight.
Yep.
It can be eating cleaner, sleeping better, drinking less, do a half hour of dry fire practice with your weapons
Mm-hmm.
so that you're coming in warmed up.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I haven't touched my gun in a month,
Sure.
right? So if you compare yourself to yourself,
Mm.
there's always something you can think of to improve on that, right?
Right.
So if you do that, so the fight doesn't happen, but so you're still alive or whatever. You're like, okay, we're cloning ourselves again now. Another fight 24 hours away. Like he slept another hour, he ate cleaner, he didn't drink, and he dry fired for 30 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Now what am I gonna do to beat that guy?
Sure.
So bring an extra mag, wear body armor, like
Bring a
something.
friend.
Like think of some way that you can be a better you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And like that philosophy really applies to pretty much anything in life, right?
Sure. Sure.
Like whether it's martial arts of one type or another, be jujitsu or firearms, or if it's sports or your spiritual life
Right.
or your financial situation,
Sure.
any of these things, like compare yourself to where you're at now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a thing you can do to make yourself a better, harder target tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, heck, it applies to dating, right? If someone had to choose to go on a date with you or the clone of you, what could you do
Yeah.
to make that person say, "I'm going to go out with him"? Right?
Mhm.
What could you do?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I like this idea of measuring things by time, right? Like, can you, what is the problem? What can you do to give yourself more time to figure out the problem, right?
So I'm going to give a little example there of uh, that comes to mind for me a lot when people are like, what do you like? What are you carrying with you all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And some people in the prepper community, like they're carrying around a backpack all the time and their pockets are all bulging along with their fanny pack and it's bulging with all this equipment. And they've got like 2 pistols and like 4 knives and a fire starting kit and like just all this stuff like flashlight, Leatherman, like medical, like all this stuff.
On their person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like all those things I just named, I'm like, oh yeah, I'd like to carry that with me. That'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
But do I need to carry like pliers and a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver and like a claw hammer and like to the grocery store?
Right.
Probably not.
Huh.
So, like, what is important to carry with you all the time? And the way I answer that question is if the thing happened now, do I have time to go get the tool that I need to solve the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can afford to, like, so like a spare jacket, am I going to carry that with me 24/7, 365?
Right. To the beach, to the family
No,
reunion.
probably not.
Mm.
Like, even in the fall, if it's going to change weather, I can afford to go to my truck and get my jacket when
Right.
I get cold because I'm just going to be cold for a little bit before
Mm-hmm.
I walk to my truck and get it.
Yep.
But if the crazy man pulls out a knife and grabs my daughter
Uh-huh.
as we're walking into the grocery store, I don't have time to be like, hold on, sir, and walk to my truck to get my pistol, right?
Yep.
Like, I need that solution right now.
Yep.
So that's how I sort of differentiate between what stays on me all the time versus what can I afford to leave in my truck
Mm.
versus what can I afford to leave at the house.
Right.
So,
Right. What is the timeline of the problem that this tool is meant to solve? Right.
mhm,
A firearm is meant to solve problems with a tiny timeline. So of course it doesn't make sense to have, yeah, I have a gun in the dresser in the dresser in my bedroom at my house. Like, great. There's no problem that's going to present itself that has a long enough timeline that you can take the time it takes to go get your solution.
yeah. And the other thing that plays into that is like the likelihood of occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
So, Phillips head screwdriver, claw hammer, like if you're working construction, yeah, you probably should carry that with you all the time because you know you're going to need it
Right.
every 10 seconds.
Yep.
So you wouldn't leave it in your truck.
Sure.
But what's the negative consequence of that? Like needing the solution but not having it with you.
Yep.
So it's like you have to balance those two things is
Hmm.
the likelihood of occurrence versus the possible negative effect of not having
Right.
the tool available.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's how the time thing comes to mind to me. But I think you were going to say something else on that too.
Oh no, it just seems like a good metric to think about, right? I mean, I know a lot of people with firearms. A lot of those people, you know, if you have a hunting rifle in a gun safe, great. You're going to go get it. You're going to take it out. You're going to go hunt with it, right? No antelope has like attacked someone in their living room. So of course, right?
Well,
Unless you're right. So of course you're going to keep your hunting rifle in a gun safe. But your pistol that you tell everyone is for self-defense, if it's also in a gun safe, chances are that that pistol is never going to be used for the purpose that you tell people that you have it for, right? Right. Or you're going to just like pause the attack and be like, hold on. All right. Like you were saying, hold on. I need to go to my gun safe. Where did I put the combination?
yeah, that kind of irritates me when people are like, "Oh, I've got my concealed carry license."
Hmm.
Okay, I don't care. You carry your gun
Hmm.
all the time,
Yeah.
or is it just like a thing
I think you own.
that you talk about? Yeah,
Hmm. Right. Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
And like, let me be fair, I guess. Like, I'm not saying that you need to, like, as a human, you need to carry a gun with you all the time,
Right.
and you don't. Like, I think as a man with responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
you have an obligation to do what you can
Uh-huh.
to protect the people around you, and especially the people that you're directly responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
But our society is so removed from the place that violence holds in our lives that some people are just completely incapable of considering those things. And if that's you, I'm not going to judge you, but if you haven't thought about violence very much,
Hmm.
maybe you shouldn't just decide to carry a gun.
If you don't have some experience of violence.
I mean, it's a very serious topic. Like we're talking about guns that have the ability to take lives.
Hmm.
So you shouldn't just think of it as a hobby or a fashion accessory or something like that. Or heaven forbid,
Some people wear guns the way guys I knew growing up wore uh, hats of certain sports teams, right? Wearing your gun was a way to sort of tell the world that you were into this, right? Hey, I wear an LA Lakers hat because I'm either into the Lakers or I sort of align myself with certain elements of West Coast rap culture, right? I've seen the same thing with firearms specifically. I have an open carry pistol because I align myself with certain values associated with people who wear their guns in, visibly open to everyone. Uh, but you're talking about a thing that could end a life.
Yeah. um, I can understand that as like a firearm being a fashion accessory or
Mm-hmm.
like I guess I've not really ever used the term fashion accessory.
Uh-huh.
That is done.
Yep.
Um, in warrior culture, it's generally more considered like a status symbol.
A status symbol.
like like Dr. Baxter would say, like warrior bling. Right? Like
Right. Right. Certain tats,
yeah, like the
certain clothes.
the type of armor you wear and the engravings on that armor says something about your status
Hmm.
in the warrior culture. Like
It's a war bonnet.
how you wear your gun, what gun you're wearing, and all those things say something about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see the appeal of that, like choosing to carry your gun openly to make that statement.
Mm-hmm.
But like in a much purer sense, you're sacrificing a lot of the reasons why you're even carrying the gun if you're carrying it openly,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may have understandable reasons for doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also sacrificing a lot of aspects of the original purpose. Like people can look at you before the fight has even started and know that you're carrying a gun.
Yep.
And if they know anything about guns and tactics, they can probably make some assumptions about your skill level based on what you're carrying and how you're carrying it as well. So you're giving up a lot of information. You're putting yourself behind the eight ball before the fight has started.
Mm.
If people can see what and how you're carrying, right?
This is really interesting. I can you make this a little more
As an
concrete for
example.
me? Yeah.
So you've got an overweight redneck with a dirty wife beater t-shirt and like unlaced high top army boots,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see that he's openly carrying a high point pistol
Uh-oh.
in a nylon holster
Mm-hmm.
on his hip, and it's as he's walking, it's flopping around, right? Okay, so there's one character,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the other side, you've got a dude that's obviously very fit, obviously spends time in the gym. He's wearing like decently fitting jeans and a collared shirt, and he's carrying a Glock 17 with an RMR on it and a light in a Safariland holster on his belt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can you make some like? I don't know what you guys think. You make some assumptions about those two things.
Gotcha. Right. If you had to, if someone said you have to fight one of these two,
Like, what are you gonna think? Like, you look at character number one.
mm.
Do you think he trains very much?
I mean, overweight is almost always we always interpret excess weight as a sign of physical laziness with some justification. Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe so high point pistols, I don't know if you know this,
Mm.
like they're not super reliable. They don't last very long. They're pretty difficult to use.
Mm-hmm.
They're extremely clunky
Mm-hmm.
and they're cheaper than a standard, like well recognized duty pistol,
Sure.
but they still cost money.
Uh-huh.
And a nylon holster on your belt that's like visibly flopping around as you're walking.
Yeah.
That's not really gaining, like giving you very much security
Does
for
not
the gun, right?
does not lead to
So like
consistent access
I'm
to
gonna
your
look at
firearm.
that person and say, you've obviously not considered like the reliability and usability of your pistol to be a very important thing. You just needed a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And then how you're carrying the gun you haven't spent you've not invested anything in that either. So that gun, like having it actually on you. Well, let me clarify this. It'd be pretty easy to rip that holster off his belt.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be pretty easy for that gun to fall out of the holster too, because the holster is just a pretty bad. It's a poor holster. It doesn't do holster things very good,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at that and you're like, this person is not ready. He has not thought about this very well. And you could say like, well, he just can't afford anything better. Like, it's a little more expensive to get the nice stuff. But we're talking about a pistol and a holster.
Hmm.
It's not that much.
Talking about incremental increases.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just like smoke a few less cigarettes, and then you could buy a decent pistol and a decent holster,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah, drink a little less Cuddy Sark.
Like, yeah, like you look at that versus the other guy that has obviously spent some time on his body and obviously spent some time on his weapon system and
Mhm.
the way that he carries it in order to ensure that it's going to function very well
Sure.
and that it's going to stay attached to him no matter what activities he engages in and no matter how like somebody else like might try to take it from him.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm gonna look at that and I'm learning information about these people
Mm.
already and I
Yep.
haven't even engaged with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if the dude walking through the store that I observe, I can't see anything on him at all.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even start that process because I don't even know if he's carrying a gun. I don't know if he's like in this story.
Sure. Sure.
So, like, it can go both
If you have a
ways.
conflict with that person, there's a huge ace in the hole that you don't, well, there's a huge potential ace in the hole. You don't know if it's there or not.
Yeah,
Right.
you can't factor that in at all.
Right. Right. Am I going to be in a shoving match with either of these two characters, or am I going to be in a shooting match with either of these two characters without being able to see his weapon because it's concealed? You don't know that. Yeah.
And I've heard people make the argument like it's a political statement. It's a good political statement for people to carry guns openly because
Mm.
people should be more used to seeing it. Like it should be
Hmm.
a common occurrence for people to be around carrying guns.
Right.
Like I can see where you're coming from there,
Mm-hmm.
but again, primary objective of what you're doing, you're sacrificing the upper hand to make this political statement.
Right. How important are political statements in your daily life compared to the effect on your daily life that any use of firearms is likely to have?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we need some T-shirts with a pistol emblazoned onto the T-shirt. You can make your political statement. Yeah. Wow. Hmm. What I want to get back to some of the other areas, but since we're on firearms, and obviously you've instructed a fair bit of firearms use in our country, it's relatively easy. It's easier to own a firearm than it is to get a driver's license once you're past a certain age. And yet, cars can be deadly, and I think it's justified that people need to learn how to use them. What are your thoughts on the accessibility of firearms given their life ending and life altering potential, whether you're the person on whom it is used or the person who pulled the trigger?
It's really it's really upsetting to see firearms used against people that didn't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say that. Like I know what that's like.
Uh-huh.
Not like it hasn't happened to me, but I've been involved in those situations.
Right.
People that got shot by guns and shouldn't have.
Uh-huh.
And I empathize with those people and the people that have been affected by that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think taking the guns out of the situation is the solution that we actually want.
Okay.
And to put the question like this way, taking the guns away,
Mm-hmm.
like if you could push the delete button and they all went away, do you want to live in that society?
Mm,
Well, for one, that delete button doesn't actually exist.
sure.
You really can't just take them all away.
Sure. It's a thought experiment.
Like even if you legislated it, you can't get rid of them all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But even if you could,
Mm-hmm.
you can always just make more.
Sure.
Really not that hard. So
despite what every firearms company would have you believe,
making
a
nice
lot
ones
of
is
people, a
more
lot of people can do
difficult.
this.
But making them at all isn't really that hard.
Mm.
So let's just assume, and it can't be done, but let's just assume that you could take away all the guns. Do you want to live in that society?
Tomorrow, everyone
that-
forgets what guns are, what they do, and how to make them.
Yeah. Is that the place? Well, no, we still know what they are because the cops and the feds still have them,
Oh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because we need somebody to do that for us.
Ah.
But us regular Americans can't have them.
Mm.
Do you want? Is that American?
Mm.
Do you want to live there? And I would say that that was kind of the whole point of the American thing in the beginning was we're a freedom loving people
Mm.
and we're going to take those risks. And that's the thing.
We're gonna take the
We're
downside.
going to take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Like part of living in a free society is
Mm-hmm.
that you also understand that it's a dangerous society. And that's the price that you pay to live in a free society.
Let me.
If you mandate safety, you no longer have a free country.
Mm.
So take some personal responsibility for these things
Sure.
and take the steps in order to make sure that nothing like this happens.
Mm.
So if you think guns are just inherently dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
then lock your guns up so
Mm.
that people can't access your guns and do crazy things with them.
Including yourself, right? Yeah. Like if you think guns are inherently dangerous,
If you don't want
if you never touch them, you can't do any harm with them.
yeah, if you don't want to have guns because you think they're dangerous, then don't get any. And if you have some, then I'll be glad to take them off your hands.
Unless they're high point, in which case, send them down the line.
Yeah. So if you don't want them because you think they're dangerous, don't have any. But then once you make that decision, know that everybody else has them.
Mm.
So how are you going to fulfill your obligations?
Mm. It's difficult. I mean, American society is certainly marked by its embrace of personal freedom, and I have grown up loving that, but our society is also a bit of a it's a bit of an experiment. It's a bit exceptional. And, and again, I really like that, but um what's my point? I think my point is that other societies have, as a group, made the determination to live another way.
Yeah.
They don't do so well.
I'm not thinking of I'm not necessarily thinking of high control societies like you would have found in the Ukraine in the 1930s. I'm not thinking of the other extreme. I'm thinking of a place like maybe 16th century France, right? Where of course there wasn't the surveillance that we have today, but there were also more, um, there were more there were other societal strictures against owning certain types of weapons, right? You had to be of a certain class of society to own, to have swords or bows of a certain kind. So, Jake, do you think? Again, I'm going back to the automobile example. Another thing that America is, frankly, quite unique in the level of embrace that we've given to the automobile. Right, our roads are the widest in the world. Our level of car ownership per capita highest in the world. I'm not condemning these things, but we do have a society in which most of us own a metal box that can hurtle along a given path at many times the rate of our evolutionary ability to travel. And in theory, we could plow that metal box into all sorts of people or property and cause untold damage. But we have a lot of strictures around who can who can drive them and some strictures around who can own them. Do you feel like maybe it's it's inconsistent, the attitude we take towards firearms versus the attitude we take towards automobiles?
Um, should I assume that you mean you can do more damage with firearms than you can with vehicles?
I don't think that's.
Or what are you asking?
I'm thinking that a person with. I'm thinking of your average person with your average car or your average small arm um, could, in their daily life, probably cause with either thing and a very comparable amount of death and destruction, right? If you drove your car into a crowded sporting event, or if you went into that crowded sporting event with a small arm, you could, your average person could cause similar amounts of tragedy. And yet, to have a driver's license that enables you to get behind that wheel legally versus the strictures we have around owning firearms legally, it seems like there's two different levels of scrutiny that we have there. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering. I think you could debate the idea that you can cause more damage with a firearm than you can, or equal damage with a firearm than you can with a car.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's debatable. Could we agree? Could we agree that you can cause you can cause tragedy with both
Absolutely.
fairly easily?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I guess I look at it as like it's it's pretty darn easy to get your driver's license.
Hmm.
And that's the one and only time anyone ever really checks on your ability to drive.
Hmm.
And
You just have to put in a certain number of hours, you're thinking.
like you have to pass a stupid test and like drive around a parking lot for a few minutes
Yep.
when you're 16, and then that gives you carte blanche to drive any vehicle.
Any non-commercial vehicle.
Yeah, any non-commercial vehicle, like anything from a Honda Accord all the way up to a Lamborghini.
Or an F550.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a big piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's more, I don't know what your driver's test was. I think for most people it's more than just a drive around the parking lot, but
Well, uh, yeah, I think I had to log a certain number of hours with a driving instructor, and then I had
okay.
the test was
Okay.
really
The test was probably half hour.
Yeah.
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 Um, yeah, I think the restrictions on driving are pretty minimal,
Mm.
and your ability to do damage with a vehicle is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really hardly ever see people advocating for more restrictions on the operation of vehicles or the types of vehicles one can operate or
Right.
where one can operate vehicles.
Yeah, we don't have right. We don't have zones like no drive zones. Hey, if you're under 25, you can't drive here. Hey, if you're under this age or under this level of experience, you can't drive anything over 2 tons. Yeah, none of that exists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you get your personal driver's license, you can drive, yeah. You can drive some yeah, you can drive a U-Haul truck.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really thought of comparing those two things that much, but
Oh.
it's like a car. Okay, you have to pass this test before you can drive a car.
Mm-hmm.
What's the test? Well, make sure you can parallel park
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you can keep within the lane as you drive around the block.
Right. Buckle up before you turn the key.
Yeah, like look behind you when you're backing up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really not that hard.
Sure.
What are the restrictions to get a gun? Don't be a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't be a felon.
Yep.
And are you buying it for yourself, not somebody else? Are you like, don't be a felon and be an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Of a
Um,
certain age.
Yeah, and be an adult
Right.
or not minor.
Yeah.
Um, it's really not that hard for either one.
Mm. Interesting. Okay. I would have said that people tend to get more training in the use of automobiles than they tend to get in the use of firearms. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying one's super hard, one's super easy, but certainly the level of training to me does seem different.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. So are you asking like, should there be a certain level of like, you have to prove some type of proficiency in order to buy a gun?
I've wondered that for years. I really have. Yeah. I remember taking a course with with some firearms instructors, and they were showing us some close quarters drills. They were showing us all sorts of things, reload drills, like I said, close quarter drills, uh, habits to be more aware of your surroundings. And I will specifically say, half of us in the class were going back to the instructors during the breaks and saying, this stuff is so useful. I didn't even know how badly I needed this course. Why is this not required for everyone? And their response was, how could you tell someone, okay, I approve you to have a firearm, and then the person who gave their approval not end up getting sued by someone, right? And so the response of these instructors was, look, we just have to say like hands off, because no one wants to be the party that says that person can now shoot. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But somehow that doesn't apply to driving instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that should be discussed, I guess, is like with a with a car, do you have a basic human right to drive a vehicle?
Mm.
No. Like you have a basic human right to travel,
Mm.
but there are a lot of other ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue more or less equally efficient
Mm-hmm.
in certain circumstances.
Yep.
Not always, I guess, but with a firearm, that's you have a basic human right to self-defense
Okay.
and to provide food for yourself.
Okay.
And there's not really any other tool that compares to a firearm as far as ability to perform both of those tasks.
Right. Right.
So, and
Oh,
we've kind of
interesting.
enshrined in our founding documents that that's a basic human right. We're going to make sure that you maintain it.
Okay. Interesting.
So I think, as much as people try to legislate different types of gun control,
Mm.
they really have kind of stayed away from, hey, we should make a test that you have to pass before you can buy a gun,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is cool. I don't know why they haven't gone against that yet. Like, I don't know why they haven't attacked that yet, but that seems to be the reason to me. It's like, hey, we have a God-given right to use whatever means necessary to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And our government has acknowledged that.
Right. By and large, kept their hands.
They're going to
off.
stay away from it.
Interesting. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense because then it's up to each individual person as well to build their skills in defending themselves.
Hmm.
So I guess it's like if you had a test to say, if you don't pass this test, you don't have the ability to have the tool to defend yourself. And that would be based on an arbitrary standard of someone else, what they think is necessary to defend yourself. So then it would kind of be like an authority structure of who determines what the level of skill is required to defend yourself. So then it would be like, well, can a person use a frying pan to defend themselves?
Uh-huh.
If they aren't certified, then they probably shouldn't use it because they could end up hurting themselves.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like a.
Are you
a-
frying pan certified?
Yeah.
Do you have your frying pan carry license?
That's a slippery slope, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. it could-
Like if you have to be certified to be able to use a gun, why don't we certify people to use knives
Yeah.
and then sticks and then
Or mace
their bare knuckles?
or pepper spray.
Or fists.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great point, right? Right. Your Honor, he killed the man with his fists because he had not been trained on how to use his fists only to the extent that he needed for self-defense and not excessive force. Therefore, I submit to you that he is guilty of homicide because he did not undergo his 30 hours of fist training.
Yeah. So in
So yeah, it's. I guess to start. To feel
That
like,
example came to my mind a little
Yeah.
too easily. You know what I mean? It just. All right. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, and in my work, like we have to pass a test with our guns every
Mhm.
certain period of time
Hmm.
in order to be certified to carry it on duty.
Yep.
But it's also a thing where like we can use whatever means necessary in order to protect our own lives
Hmm.
if that happens to take place.
Hmm.
So I go and take a test to be able to shoot this pistol.
Hmm.
But if I use this other one because it was the only one I could reach and weird scenario, but maybe the suspect took my actual gun that I'm certified to use.
Hmm.
So I found a bat and I killed him with the bat before he shot me.
Hmm.
Like it's okay for me to do that.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
why what if I don't pass the test with my pistol,
Mm.
but then use the pistol to protect myself?
Sure.
How does that fall into it?
Mm.
Because I can use whatever means necessary to protect myself, but I hadn't certified on that.
Hmm.
Turns into a weird scenario.
Right. You have to certify with a pistol because you do not have an innate right to be an officer of the peace. Right. So society, recognizing that you do not have the innate right to be an officer of the peace, says in order to be an officer of the peace, you have to pass certain standards that we invent or agree upon for our officers of the peace. And those standards are these, and there's all sorts of standards. But you're saying when it comes to the defense, you can't say, oh, you have to pass these standards in order to defend yourself.
Yeah, I think it's because of that sort of scenario, like if you're in a contract with conventional society, then it's people deciding what they think is best for the society to work.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to the individual person, we're all at the same level of the God-given rights given to us.
Sure.
So then it's like, well, then it's each individual's responsibility to protect themselves or whatever else they do. And so you couldn't legislate an authority who is at the same level as you
Mm.
to say how you can be at the level they are to defend yourself. I think that's what it is. It's like kind of like saying we're all human, we all have these rights. So based on that level, that's what you should determine how you can defend yourself.
If these tools exist for defense or the gathering of food.
But in a certain way, we should be able to buy larger tools of defense
I would agree with that.
because we have much greater threats
Mm.
that could attack us, and we don't have a way to defend ourselves except through a conventional saying of, oh, we can only defend ourselves in these ways.
Mm.
So then it's saying that authority of another larger group is now determining whether or not I will survive or not.
Mm. Right. Who will be the first private company to own a nuclear missile? Yeah, your first privately held nuclear arm.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The answer to that question is probably out there already.
Somebody.
Somebody, like a private individual, probably does own one of those for a private company.
Right. But it's
We're
not
being told about that.
we're not being told. Yeah. So there's always the watershed of when something becomes out in the open. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like a lot of people, when the gun control subject comes up, people
Mhm.
no machine guns. The founding fathers could never have like thought of the type of weapons that we can make these days.
Founding fathers did not say, "Oh, only small individual arms is the ones
No.
that you're right."
Like
Well,
in that time period, they all owned cutting edge weapons,
mm-hmm,
not only individually but from a collective perspective too.
mm-hmm.
They were not just carrying around muskets, but they were toting cannons and battleships. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, like some ships were private battleships. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I yeah,
And
that right, sure. There were privateers. I mean, we had a word for them, the privateers. Usually they had some sort of commission, but yes, they were private. They were privately owned.
well, if since we're like on the podcast, I should probably quote the like name the book and the author and whatnot.
Uh,
I read a book about Paul Revere
uh-huh.
and Paul Revere's Ride. It's gonna take me forever to find it here. I didn't read it. I listened to it.
Whoa. No, that counts. That counts in the modern day. We don't
Yeah, that
we are an
counts.
audio driven platform. We do not condemn any audio. Yeah.
Paul Revere's Ride by David Hackett Fisher. It's a pretty interesting take on or insight into like colonial America.
Hmm.
Um, your average village, somebody there knew how to get a hold of a cannon.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had cannons available.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't just, your equivalent to a multimillionaire that had privateer battleships on the coast. Like everybody had their little musket, which was equivalent to today's AR,
Sure.
basically. But they all like there were cannons around too that
Mhm.
weren't that uncommon.
Yep.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. Like capability of your individual small arm has advanced dramatically since then.
Sure.
But your field artillery is still a pretty slow rate of fire, like single shot
Hmm.
field gun in lots of situations too. Those types of equipment really hasn't changed
Hmm.
that much from the old black powder cannons to a 155 howitzer. It's still just a single shot field piece.
Right. Wow. Go ahead, Tom.
I just was saying it brings up an interesting thought experiment I had a while ago.
Hmm.
And it was that wars would end if no one could get hurt. Because if you can't hurt or kill somebody, there's no point to go to war with them.
Sure.
So essentially, the best way to eliminate the possibility for war is to make as many people as invincible as possible.
Hmm.
So I think that's why tangential, but I think that's a reason why we've been revoked our our right to defend ourselves in greater ways
Hmm.
is because then we can be put into a system of war easier.
Hmm.
It's like if the government's the only one that owns planes and battleships and everything else, and they're the ones that chooses which wars we fight.
Sure.
If we owned all that stuff, we could say, nah, dog, we don't want to do that. And they wouldn't have a choice. They'd be like, okay. But then, like, if another, like, the only reason, like, um, people in third world countries and things are attacked is because they have no way to defend themselves.
Hmm.
If, let's say, Africans had the same armaments as we did, we wouldn't want to fight them because there's not very high probability that we're going to win. And that's why terrorists work. Terrorists only go after the unarmed, the helpless, because they know they're going to win.
Hmm.
They're cowards, so they don't want to fight big bad dudes that are Americans that will put them down. It's like, and so I think if you take that thought and as an experiment, broaden it out, you could think of there's a lot of ways you can make people really have heighten their defense,
Hmm.
and then you greatly reduce the probability of war.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose that there could be a paradigm distinction made there, right? People who say we need to take away people's guns, we need to take away people's ability to cause harm, probably agree with the general principle that if no one can get hurt, no one will fight, right? Or no one will attempt to cause harm because you can't, right? So so they're saying we need to reduce the amount of harm that can be caused by any group or individual. On the other side of that paradigm is the understanding that there's always someone willing to do harm, and there's always someone striving to be capable of maximizing harm. Therefore, the best response is to maximize our ability to prevent harm. And so that probably is where many of the political battles are fought, is along the line of people who see an increase in the robustness of our defense as the best answer versus a eradication of the ability to cause harm as the best answer.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's always a way, like, because the world is so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to eliminate weapons, you essentially eliminate life. Okay, you have to eliminate water. You have to eliminate food, because you can hit somebody in the head with an apple and can hurt them real bad. It's like there's so many things that can cause damage. So it's like if you try to eliminate all forms of problems, you end up with
Sort of
nothing.
a bland and meaningless world. Yeah. Hmm.
The 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 powers are trying to create a monopoly on the use of force.
Yeah.
And
We will decide when
that
force can
goes
be
back
used.
to my prepper idea.
Uh-huh.
Is the whole point is to destroy the monopoly.
Hmm.
Whether it's about use of force or food, water, anything else like that.
Oh, interesting. Oh, this is interesting.
The
Yep.
monopoly.
Okay.
Like bring some of that back.
Right.
Bring some of that home
Mm-hmm.
so that you have an answer.
Yeah.
So like man, I've had so many different thoughts just now. But what is violence? Like we all grew up and our mom and dad told us violence isn't the answer.
My dad didn't tell me that.
Good for you. Not only is that false, violence is the ultimate answer. It is the final answer.
It's the last answer.
It's not the always. It's not the always answer, but it's the final answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you were talking, it brought this up to me. You're like, "Hey, go to war." Like, I don't want to. You don't have a choice. So, if somebody's like, "Hey, step in this line over here," what can be your response? What's going to be your response? If you're a helpless wimp, your only response is yes sir, yes sir. But if you have some skill and you have some tools, you can say, "Nah, bro, I don't think so." Which is that's a risky response. You better be willing to back that up. But if you've prepared yourself, if you've taken some steps to remove the monopoly in the use of force area, you can afford to say, "No, I don't think I agree with you, sir. I don't think I want to step in this line and get on the train."
Yeah.
Right?
There's an oven at the end of it.
Yeah.
True. It's like this is interesting. The highest and the men with the highest testosterone are the only ones that can say no the most.
Similar vein there.
Yeah. It's like they have a force that's equal or stronger than the force attacking them, and they can say no.
A couple different people again. There's this article, like, what place does violence hold in our society? It's an article by Jack Donovan called "Violence is Golden," and it talks about like, what is violence obsolete in this modern society where the rule of law prevails and we all stop at the red light and go on the green light and we all pay our taxes and we all drive on the right side of the street? Like, is violence obsolete? No, we've just contracted it out to other people. So
And that's not necessary. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
when you're advocating for a new law about don't let your dog use the bathroom in my yard,
Mm-hmm.
you want that to become a law,
Mm.
what are you actually saying? Like,
Enforced.
yeah, are you going to enforce it? No, like the 60-year-old lady that's screaming at the city council meeting is probably not going to, chase down the dog owner that crapped in her yard. Like, what's the ultimate end of that
Mm. Right.
interaction?
Authority always
So
has to
if
have some force available to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like if the dog takes a dump in your yard and the dog owner doesn't clean it up
Mm-hmm.
and the police go to her house, what happens next?
Right.
Like 99% of the time, it's a conversation. Hey, cut that out. Don't do it again. But what if that person says, or else what?
Uh-huh.
This is what Jack Donovan talks about.
Uh-huh.
Violence is the ultimate answer to that question.
Mm.
Or else what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we live in a society where most of the time we understand the consequences to our actions.
Sure.
So we sort of agree to play along with the rules of this society that we live in. But everything, like the entire structure of our society, is backed up by violence. Because if I say, hey man, I don't like the color of your house,
Mm.
like, what? Okay, bro, what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
Like the only law that holds any weight is the one that's held up by some sort of threat.
Yeah, yeah. I think there can be carrot and stick arrangements, right? If you behave in a way that is
Do you think carrots mean anything to jihadis?
um in inside their society,
Quote, true believer.
the quote unquote true believer. The carrots offered by
Would
this
you
the society they're offering, no, probably not. But the carrots offered by their own society probably do mean something,
would you
right?
recant your faith if someone offered you a big enough carrot?
Some people would. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you wouldn't,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But
No, I'm not disagreeing at all that violence has a sort of the threat of violence, the resource of violence has a lot of merit. I do think that societies tend to offer a threat and reward system inside inside our societies, and some people are motivated by the carrots, right?
right,
I mean, a lot of
the
jihadis.
finality of the thing is the point, though.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
when all else fails, what do you come down to?
Hmm.
If you can't convince the person to act in a certain way, you freaking make them,
if
and that works.
if you want to
Unless you
keep
have
your
less
society
ability to
intact.
force the person than the other person
Hmm.
does,
Hmm.
right? So in the end,
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
when everything else fails, it comes down to who has better violence than the other person.
Mm.
In the end, that's who wins.
Hmm.
Like, if everything else fails, if reason and bribery and all these other things don't work,
Hmm.
what are you left with?
Sure.
So if you come up to someone that's committed to their course of action and you try the carrot, you try the reason, you try the sympathy, whatever,
Sure.
but it just needs to happen.
Mm.
What are you going to do?
Right.
All these things failed. What are you going to do?
Right.
Does he win? Well, how
Not
committed are
if
you to making this happen?
not if you want to keep your society intact.
Which brings me to the other point. Another book by Varg Freeborn. He's a incredible. He's got an
We're
incredible.
not going to be able to have you back on for a couple of years. We got reading to do.
He's got an incredible story. I think the book is called. I should be able to find it easier here. Violence of Mind.
Hmm.
Really incredible story. Whatever course of action you take,
Mhm.
if you want to contradict someone else, how far are you willing to go?
Mhm.
Like, if someone cuts in line in front of you at the DMV,
Sure.
are you going to call out to him and be like, "Hey, bro, that was my spot. Get
Yep.
to the back of the line"?
Yeah.
You could do that, but what if he responds with profanity and says, "No, I'm staying here"?
Hmm.
Like, how committed are you to this confrontation now?
How committed are you to your spot in line?
Yeah. And those types of interactions happen all the time, right? And they generally end with one of them tucking tail and going to the back of the line. And it may not always be the person that, by our social structures should have been there. But if you're going to start that confrontation, how far into that are you willing to go?
Hmm.
Because in all likelihood, you have no idea who this person is, and you have no idea how committed they are to their course of action.
Right. Are they trying
So,
to sneak into line, or are they brazenly saying, "No, I don't want to be inconvenienced today. I'm going to the front of the line."
yeah. So, like, I would say, like, if you're gonna start a confrontation with someone,
Hmm.
how willing, like, how far do you want to take this?
Sure.
Because once you start it, you may not have the ability to back out again.
Sure.
And then where are you going to be?
Yep.
How committed is he to this confrontation?
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, 99% of the time, these things happen every day and nothing bad happens and people part ways, winner and loser. But it also happens where people fight to the death over this confrontation. So maybe you should ask yourself, like, before you say, "Hey, man, you parked in the handicap spot in the parking lot.
Right.
Like, you should move your car." He's like, "Or else what?" "Well, I'll pay you $10 to move your car." Is that what you're going to say?
Right.
He's like, "How about I shoot you instead?
Hmm.
Because I'm going to park in that handicap spot." Like, there are people out there that would do that sort of thing. So it's you know, we would all love to live in a place where everyone followed the rules, but is it your job, or should you really, use that opportunity to educate someone else as to
As to the structure of the
what types
rules.
of people park in handicap spots?
Right.
Like, are you willing to put your life on the line to
Right. Are you willing to say, "Hey, buddy, I will I will beat you so badly that you're going to need the handicap spot."
I mean, well, that's kind of the thing. We're not talking about beatings. We're talking about someone not leaving.
Sure.
So that's a I think that's something that people should consider when they're talking about, going back to whether or not you should carry a gun
Hmm.
or something,
Mm-hmm.
is what types of scenarios are you going to involve yourself in?
Mm-hmm.
And how important is this situation that you found yourself in?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, whether or not you're carrying a gun, if you have some of this knowledge about human interaction, if somebody cuts into your line,
Mm-hmm.
like, is your pride so big that you can't let that stand?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you should just go to the back of the line.
Mm.
and allow this person to demonstrate his, disregard of social norms
Uh-huh.
because it's not worth you dying over.
Mm.
Because that could be what happens.
Sure.
Or maybe, I don't even know if it's worse. Maybe you kill the guy over it
Uh-huh.
and you survive, but he doesn't because he cut in line in front of you.
Uh-huh.
From a court's perspective, there's tons of variables, but
Right.
it really could turn out where you end up in the right.
Mm-hmm.
No charges
Mm-hmm.
or no convictions. You're gonna get a charge.
You're not in a court without
Like,
charges.
yeah, like maybe you kill a dude over cutting in front of you in the line, and you go home 2 years later, no convictions.
Right. But you're probably
Was that
broke.
really worth it?
Yeah.
It's like
Like,
5 minute wait in the line versus 2 years. How much money and someone died?
and the moral and psychological after effects.
Yeah.
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 Like, there are, one should consider this. There should be certain things you're willing to kill for,
Right.
and other things that really just aren't worth it.
Mm.
Even if it's legally justifiable,
Sure.
do you really want to change your life for it
Mm.
and someone else's for it?
Sure.
And if you start that interaction, confrontation, or you agree to be involved in the confrontation,
Mm.
like you've started that movie.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. People complain that their lives are boring, not enough like a movie. Well, you could be involved in a legal drama. Might regret that. Oh. Oh, let's take a quick break.
Um, yeah. Have you heard about light therapy?
Uh-uh.
So there's three things. So the grounding is the first, or it doesn't really out the order, but grounding, oxygen, and red light are like the three main things to keep your body running at optimal, or I guess normal levels.
Mm.
Okay.
But red light is mimicking the sunlight that heals your cells. So your cells receive light and it activates a lot of things. And one of those things is it allows your mitochondria to accept oxygen in your cell.
Mm.
So mitochondria runs at two power settings, 2x power and 16x power. And the factor is whether or not it has oxygen. So all the things your mitochondria does, enzyme production, cellular regeneration, all these different things is supercharged with oxygen. So that's why when they're in an ambulance and they put oxygen on people, it's not because they can't breathe, it's to make them heal faster.
Huh.
So hyperbaric chambers, when you have a load of oxygen,
Hmm.
it essentially just flushes your whole system with oxygen and everything just starts working way better. So it's really interesting. So red light helps do that. Then oxygen tanks is like an added benefit of like you can get these
Is that like a Bacta tank?
kinda, yeah. It's like this huge 90-liter bag
Yeah.
on a compressor, and you just put a mask on, and it takes about 10 minutes to breathe in. You want to be doing some sort of exercise because just pure oxygen is kind of dangerous for you. But
Wait, it's pure oxygen?
like 96%.
Whoa.
It's dense.
That's high metabolic activity that you would get from that.
Yeah.
That is wild.
We were like either like biking hard, running hard, or something.
Yep.
And so that essentially like kicks out everything.
Mhm.
So um it's wild. So I mean you can do all these things just like in nature, like doing breathing exercises allows you to get more oxygen in each breath. Having bare feet, and then just sunlight.
Mhm.
It's massive. So that's why everyone always envisions going to the beach as like their dream vacation.
Because your bare feet,
Bare feet
lots of sun.
and fresh oxygen from the ocean.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay.
That's why everyone always thinks of going to the beach because that's their dream vacation because they're gonna feel so much better.
Mm. Right.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So the grounding thing, like, how much time do you actually have to spend barefoot?
About 20 minutes a day. It's
Hmm.
workable.
Does it have to be spread out? Like if it's a discharge of buildup, right?
Hmm.
So should you spread it out like throughout the day to get the most benefit from that?
I haven't heard of whether or not spreading it out. I just heard a total amount of 20 minutes.
Hmm.
So I think you can do it all at once because they actually sell mats too that will mimic grounding and do it faster than just standing on the ground.
Hmm.
So like 18 minutes on the mat would be like 10 hours on the ground.
Huh.
So they sell those too.
Or just lay naked in the dirt?
That'd be yeah,
We do that.
it's frowned upon in society.
Thanks,
People
Scott.
might
Right. Depends where the dirt
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
people
Huh.
might-
So what about in the house? Can you go barefoot in the house?
I
Or is
don't
that
know.
not the same thing? Is the
I-
house grounded?
That's what I'm not sure because I think it's anything conductive.
Hmm.
And earth is automatically conductive because so many minerals are in the soil.
Hmm.
So I don't know about like wood or tile.
So maybe if you were like a concrete floor in the basement or something like that.
Yeah, I think concrete would have a better chance. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm still trying to find out that answer. I've been wondering it for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's tough here in Wyoming because half the year it's like I can't right. I want to walk barefoot outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll lose a toe. I'm
Yeah.
super well grounded though, you know. Right. Yeah. Huh. Um oh, I want to go back to I mean, we started talking about prep and then we went down the rabbit hole of thinking about firearms, self-defense, some legal issues associated with that. But you mentioned food, water, shelter, and security, right? So it seems that much of the discussion around firearms, of course, relates to security. But then when we think about hunting, it really relates to food.
Yeah.
How do you think about um, food in from a preparation point of view? I think you think about it in more than just, oh, I've got X number of days of food stashed in my basement. For you, it's also raising chickens, growing a garden, hunting.
Mm, like the garden and the chickens, um, I guess that yields rewards immediately, even when society is operating normally.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of the way I really focus my thought on that topic. Like it is a source of food that we have there
Uh-huh.
in case we couldn't get food somewhere else.
Mhm.
But just from a really practical day-to-day perspective, it's a source of food that's, well, a lot cheaper than buying it from the store, and it's a lot cleaner because
Mm.
I know exactly what's being put on those things or put in those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's um, the chickens in the garden. And it's also hobbies too. Like my wife just loves those types of things, and
Right.
that's she really loves it. So it's her daily hobby
Uh-huh.
to be involved in that kind of thing. So
Chickens
there's
are
benefits there as well.
chickens are very entertaining. I mean, you can sit on your back porch and watch chickens go about their day, and
Hilarious.
it's poor man's television, man. I mean, it's like a little soap opera in your backyard. You know, all these little fights, these conflicts, are running around, getting excited about things. I mean,
That's the actual curse of television is you don't watch the things you should be looking at.
mm-hmm. Have you heard about the feral peacocks over on this side of the
Oh my
town?
God. Oh,
You probably got you guys.
it's all over. It's all
They're all over. They're all over the town.
So the calls have come from as far west as Tweed Lane to
Okay.
as far east as um, Delray.
Really? Because the
Or
peacocks are
Del.
actually there, or there's just concerned citizens?
Yeah. So Del. Yeah, Del.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like not Delray like North Second.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Del like just south of like 500 block east Main Street.
Right.
So pretty much both ends of town and everywhere in between.
So
Peacocks.
Peacocks.
the Great Escape.
Nobody knows.
No one knows the origin of these
Or
peacocks.
whoever does know where they came from is not.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. I mean, they are you got to admire them. I mean, they really have eked out a existence for the last 4 or 5 months here in Lander. But I mean, I'm telling you, Tom, they make the weirdest sounds, and they make them at 3 in the morning. I mean, you'll just be sleeping, and just out of the middle of nowhere, you'll just hear. I mean, that is what they sound like. I mean, I I will also say I can't believe how many conversations I've had with people where they're saying, "What are we going to do about the chicken? I mean, about the peacocks, right?" I mean, people are genuinely concerned. We should get honestly, we should get a like a GoFundMe campaign going. We would we would legitimately get some money into it. Yeah. So people are trying to find someone to adopt the peacocks. So I don't know what's going to happen to them this winter.
They'll get introduced to Wyoming,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they hang out on my back porch every once in a while. Oh.
Animals have a crazy ability to just make it happen,
Mm.
even through those extreme scenarios. So,
I mean, hey, all
They'll
power
thrive.
to them.
They'll
I mean,
thrive.
I'm I'm fully in support. I hope they make it through. Oh.
Reminds me of I just want to share this quick story.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was at working on the Buffalo Ranch out on Sinks a couple years ago. Because we were contracting there for construction, but they had a break, so I was helping build their fence. And so one day I came in and there's this creek that comes along the driveway. And I see out in the field there's all the buffalo and it's snowing and they're like huddled down and it's a really cold day. It's I think -10 or something. And I'm like, wow, it's a cold day. Like those poor animals just toughing it out. And then I'm driving by this creek. I look down and there's ducks playing in the water. And I was like, "No, these are the real animals. Like they're having a good old time in water at this temperature.
And how cold was it?
It's like -10.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And yeah, the buffalo are looking really tired and cold, and the ducks are just having a great old time.
The buffalo were a little down in the mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Jake, how much do you hunt?
not not that much.
Not that much.
Yeah.
No. Just family keeps you busy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, um I used to put in for antelope tags pretty much every year.
Sure.
Um, but recently we've been having kids in the fall.
Ah.
So
So number 5 is on the way. Is that right?
yep.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yep.
How many boys? How many girls?
One boy.
One boy.
now. Yeah. One boy, 3 girls, and this one coming up is supposed to be a boy. We'll see. Yeah.
Jury's still out.
Pretty excited.
Uh-huh.
So that's supposed to be in October.
Yeah.
So the last couple of years I haven't really done any hunting.
Right, right. Well, you're raising the next generation. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
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 How excited are your kids to get out and start shooting?
Oh, yes.
Yes, they are excited.
Yep. They they actually did a little shooting today, in fact.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
These are your oldest two?
So the oldest is 5.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, going all the way down to the youngest is like one and some change. So yeah, I mean it's not they're not like freestyle like shooting on their own. It's basically, you give them the same talk that you give older kids.
Sure.
Here's the safety rules, treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. Keep in a straight, safe direction.
Yep.
Be aware of your target's foreground and background. All that basic stuff. But
Yep.
they've seen me around the house, doing my dry fire practice.
Yep.
So I guess for the people that don't understand that kind of thing, it's like practicing your firearm skills without using live ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
So generally it's making a clean trigger press on an empty chamber, in a safe direction, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing the other aspects of shooting, drawing from the holster, doing magazine changes, target transitions, things like that. Like all those types of dry skills that don't require actually firing rounds to practice the skills.
Right.
Kids have seen me doing all that stuff
Yeah.
for
Since they
their
were,
whole life.
yeah, since they opened their eyes.
So, they're pretty excited about the shooting thing. So today, I'd take my oldest and hold the rifle out like this in the safe direction,
Mm-hmm.
out towards the berm, talk them through the talk, like, don't put your finger on the trigger until I tell you to.
Right.
Okay. And then I put their hands where their hands are supposed to be,
Right.
alongside mine. And like, okay, you ready? Is the gun pointed in the right direction?
Yep.
Okay, that's where you're shooting, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, you ready? Okay, put your finger on the trigger. And just go through just a single shot like that, just a little exposure, and they're super excited about
Yeah,
it.
that's
So,
badass, man.
yeah, they're pretty young, but the I think breeding the familiarity
Hmm.
along with the proper use and the understanding of the rules and things like that.
Hmm.
If they can understand what's being said and they can follow directions,
Yeah.
get them started. Why not?
Right. Right.
And obviously you have to accompany that with repercussions if there's violation of those rules.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it as well. If they do something they're not supposed to, then they get in trouble for that. So,
Mm-hmm.
breeding those, the rules, the skills, the habits, and everything like that early is part of how you can prevent accidents in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So they're excited about it. They had a great time. I thought it was pretty fun too.
Right. Right. Man.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Getting them out early. Oh. Wow, but not a lot of hunting recently.
No, not too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll come back. Um, Something you and I have talked about intermittently was, okay, you think about your ability to defend yourself, your person. Okay, that goes back to the security aspect, solving problems that come up in the, that 10-second or less window. Something that you and I have talked about a few times, but something I'd like to understand more is, you've spoken about communication, right? The ability to have a network of people who are pretty aligned with the same goals, and having good communication between those people. What are your thoughts and principles when it comes to having a network of people, how you keep up relationships with them in the good times, but then how you would actually conduct communication with them if something very drastic happened?
I don't have an answer for you.
Let's start with the technology question.
That's a weak link in my preparedness setting.
So maybe it's a temperament thing. You gotta, yeah.
Um,
Let's start with the technology side then. I mean, what if you were to design your ideal communication system, if there was no longer cell service, no longer internet, what would that communication look like in your mind? Little handheld radios,
there'd
something
be-
even more primitive?
No, I mean, ideally, you'd live close enough to each other that you can communicate in person.
Okay.
So another aspect of preparedness is fitness, right? So be able to move around.
Hmm.
So your immediate group of people should be close enough to each other that they can link up on foot if necessary.
Okay.
So communication, I would try to set up some idea about like trigger events
Mm-hmm.
where if this type of thing happened, then we'd link up in person.
Okay.
And
At a known location.
yeah.
And everyone just knows where, not everyone, your group
Yeah.
knows.
Everyone, as in whoever's involved with us.
Okay.
We have here's some types of trigger events generically. Like if something like this happens, then we should probably link up in person and communicate potential plans or courses of action or what types of events are taking place.
Okay.
And then, follow on from there. If it's an electronic communication, it can be hacked,
Okay.
no matter
Okay.
what people say.
It can be hacked. It can be forgotten. It can run out of batteries.
Yeah. And so, like, there's everything is still viable, I guess. Like you can look at it from that perspective. If it's super sensitive, then the only way to do it is face to face inside a Faraday cage.
Uh-huh.
But that doesn't mean you can't use a phone anymore.
Right.
So depending on what's going on, if you want to use two-way walkie-talkies from Walmart or whatever, like those are viable options.
Sure. What would we say everybody, what do you think is the ideal size of everybody? 4 families, 5 guys?
Everybody would literally include everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
I
fact of the
I
matter
say
is
so easily. I hadn't thought of that.
everyone doesn't, perceive the same objective that you do.
Uh-huh.
So, maybe the first question should be who's trying to arrive at the same end goal as
Mhm.
you are,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be pooling our efforts with those people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
So when I think of like preparedness, self-reliance, community support, things like that, I'm not looking for other people that are interested in preparedness and self-reliance and community support primarily.
Okay.
What I'm primarily looking for is people that want to see the same things happen that I do.
Ah, okay.
So
You're not trying to be part of this prepper community. You're trying to
you
be
think I
part of it.
should, join forces with a prepper preparedness, community support, self-reliance Satanist? They're probably not going to want to see the same things happen that I do.
Mm,
So what do I want my life to look like?
mm,
What is the ideal life that I want?
mm-hmm.
What do I want my kids to grow up with?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try to align myself. It's the same thing as regular society. Like, who
Mm.
are your friends? Right?
Right.
Who do you want to spend time with? Who do you want your kids to grow up spending time with?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of role models do you want your kids to have?
Sure.
You spend time with those people.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the people that I want to be prepared. Those are the people that I'm naturally going to spend time with, that I'm going to want to be there in the future.
Mm.
So to me, it's not align myself with people that have a prepper mindset. To me, it's instill a sense of self-reliance with the people that are important to me, that want the same outcomes in life as I do. That's that's the that's the objective that I try to work for.
Sure.
I guess, if that makes sense.
If you were to advise someone who says, okay, yeah, I love hanging out with my group of families that we can trust each other, we can trust our kids with their kids, great. That's there. I have that, be it through church or a homeschool group or a school group, whatever. All right, I've got the community. We want the same things. What would you advise someone who says, Jake, I want to get a little more organized? What would that look like? What should that look like?
Oh, what do you mean by more organized?
Okay, let's go back to
Like get the
let's
the,
go back to
the
that trigger event.
basics.
Let's go back to that trigger event. Okay, trigger event happens, or event happens. Is it a trigger event? Have we decided what the trigger events are? Something drastic happens. September 11th, something closer to home. Is that a trigger event? Have we decided what a trigger event is? And if so, where are we going? We going to somebody's house? We going outside town? We going someplace visible, someplace out of sight?
So the time thing comes back to mind.
Yeah.
Like, um, if I was going to work on a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
I would say get the foundation set first.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have like some food, water, and shelter? Do you
Mm.
have enough food and water to get through a couple weeks?
Couple weeks.
Okay, if you're there, make it a couple months. Your shelter, is your house secure? Can you survive in your house without power and like facilities?
Mm.
And then like the males, without being the males in the scenario,
Mm.
turn them into teammates,
Uh-huh.
not just other humans, but beneficial, viable teammates to achieve goals when doing activities.
People who are capable of violence.
Yes, but not only,
Okay.
but yes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if it's violence that's called for, can they operate in a violent scenario effectively and safely and level headed?
Mm.
Things like that. Do they have the skills and equipment and experience in order to be a viable teammate in a violent scenario?
Okay.
And then otherwise, do they have other skills that they can use to be beneficial teammates?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I would develop those things, right? And it's buying you time. So you've got the food, water, and shelter. Now you've got a teammate that can help you get through some weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we got through the dark night of the city. And
Right. The day we realize
the
no
power
more
is
food
out,
trucks are
the
coming.
police aren't coming, the ambulance barn is down.
Mm.
We're just here for an unknown amount of time, but people came and tried to take our stuff. They didn't get our stuff. We're all still okay.
Mm.
We've got enough food, water, medical, and all that kind of stuff to survive for a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Now we can figure it out.
Right.
We don't necessarily like it's better if you have these plans already, but if you don't,
Mm.
like now we can figure it out.
You have some space to breathe.
We've got 3 or 4 families together. We've
Mm.
got 30 kids and you know, 6 capable males
Right.
with their own sets of equipment,
Yeah.
and we're stable now.
Mm-hmm.
If another crazy event happened tonight, we could make it through the night.
Okay.
That would be a starting point. Like if you had that situation, you'd be miles ahead of the next guy.
Sure. Sure.
So how much farther down the road do you need to get?
Mm.
Well, get that figured out first,
Yep.
I would say. And if you do have that figured out, it's kind of going back to like the dude that sells all of his belongings and prepares for a reverse in gravity or something like that, like
Mhm.
this super niche prep for a thing that might not ever happen.
The day they turn
Like,
gravity off.
we don't know what's going to happen. So trying to plan specifically for a specific event
Uh-huh.
is pretty fruitless, I think. Like just get your basics covered and then buy yourself a couple weeks to figure out the next step.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you really need to do.
Okay.
That's all really we have time to do. We barely have time to do that.
Right. Right.
Like we've all got regular lives. We've got families we need to support and everything else. So don't worry about that. Like what's your plan?
Mm.
So you're one family in a group of 6 families in the city.
Yep.
That they all want the same thing. We're all working towards the same goal. We're on the same page with stuff.
Mhm.
We want to prevail.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You don't necessarily like, are you going to go to this city or the other city when the Black Swan event happens?
Mm.
You don't have to know that yet, because like depending on the event that happens, that plan might not be available to you.
Right.
So if you make your plan so specific that it only works in this certain scenario,
Mm.
that's not really that beneficial.
Right.
So like have a group of people that are all oriented to the same direction, that possess a basic set of skills and a basic set of equipment
Mm.
in order to buy yourself some time to figure out a long-term plan.
Right.
I think that's a pretty good goal for people to work towards.
Right. Yeah, I think people are always attracted to the concrete. And so I like that idea of saying, hey, 3 to 4 weeks, right? 21 to 30 days, can you give yourself some time to breathe, to think, to talk to people? Equally concretely, do you have 5 or 6 people that you can really rely on? Right. That's a manageable number of relationships. That's a manageable number of people. And so I think if that was a rule of thumb, that would help a lot of people feel like, okay, I don't have to be this person who's like ready to be holed up in a cabin by myself for a year. Like who can do that? But 3 to 4 weeks of food and 5 or 6 people that you can really count on. I think a lot of people feel like, yeah, I think I could do that.
Yeah. And I value, as far as a teammate goes, I value someone that I can trust morally so much more than like a skilled operator, so to speak.
Say more about that.
If I was to use Lord of the Rings as an example,
Uh
Samwise Gamgee,
huh.
he's a total stud.
Yeah.
But he's not, the renowned warrior.
Mm,
You're crossing the known world, going to the center of the evil place.
mm,
You're bound to cross bad people where you want a warrior on your side.
mm,
But who did Frodo have to accompany him the entire way? His most trusted companion.
mm.
And that was his character. That
Right.
was his skill set. Well,
Right.
I mean, he had other skills, but like his primary trait
Mm,
on his character card is trusted companion,
mm-hmm.
not warrior or wizard or XYZ.
Mm.
It was trusted companion.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, and who comes closest to taking the ring from Frodo is Boromir, right? Someone who by standard standards would be like, oh yeah, we want this amazing
That's
warrior
the example that
renowned for
yeah,
his strength.
is like who's the contrasting character?
Mm,
The renowned warrior
mm-hmm.
that's revered by his entire culture,
Mm-hmm.
but he's the one that ends up betraying Frodo.
Yeah, betraying the mission.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which there's way more to his story. Boromir kind of can make the argument that he redeems himself in the end.
Right, right.
But
Yeah, right. Uh, we're not looking to paint with too broad of a brush, but at the same time, yeah, what Sam does for Frodo is life saving, yeah, and mission saving.
that brings him up another incredibly interesting tangent.
We are all about the tangents.
So the truth. Should the truth be told? And Boromir dies and makes a confession to Aragorn, basically. And then the rest of, Legolas and Gimli come up and ask Aragorn what happened.
Mm.
He tells a very censored version of the story and then says basically, that's all I'll say for now.
Mm-hmm.
And the narrator indicates that it's years and years and years later before Aragorn tells anyone the entire story that Boromir shared before he died.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because, like, the truth is always the thing. Like lying. Obviously, we're not supposed to do lying,
Right.
but maybe sharing the entire truth isn't necessarily the right action.
Yeah, you have to ask
yourself.
yourself.
That's a really interesting topic.
It's true. Yeah. What truth can someone handle? Yeah. And that calls for some prudential judgment. I mean, the time I wrestled with this the most is when I was working at the Catholic college, former classmate of ours, someone that we had, shared a lot of experiences with, but had really lost his way in the years between graduation and when he approached me about he wanted me to recommend him for a job at the college. Um, and while it was true that it wasn't something that I could recommend him for, I remember very distinctly that I was too blunt in the way I said, "Hey, look, X, Y, and Z are in the way, right, of that, right?" And
Mhm.
I was, I was overly explicit. I was overly, I was overly blunt in like, "Hey, you have these problems, right? You've chosen all these things." Um, and what I should have said was something more gentle, something more, um, yeah, something more
Well,
considerate of what that person could handle.
you know the situation and I don't,
Yeah.
but when you're speaking to the individual face to
Mm-hmm.
face, I think a lot can be said for bluntness.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I admire people that are what society would consider too blunt.
Mm-hmm.
I think bluntness, very explicit language like that is a good approach to take because nobody can say that it was unclear what you meant,
Mm-hmm.
right? I guess like in the way that I'm thinking of it is maybe you know maybe everybody doesn't need to know what I know about Barmir.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell Barmir off as much as I want
Mm.
in an extremely explicit and very blunt way to his face between him and me.
You're right.
But that's because we're involved.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're talking about that issue with someone else, like
Right.
that's not their business.
What do you report to?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you report outside the relationship?
Yeah. And
Mm.
that's an interesting topic. Oh, sometimes I like and I agree with that. I want to give people the opportunity to make amends for situations that they may have been involved in.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder sometimes, I my default answer is generally other people don't need to be involved in this if it doesn't concern them.
Mm.
But if I was that other person, maybe I'd like to know who getting involved with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not explaining this very clearly, but
Well, there's always the difficulty of prudence, right? There's always the difficulty that there's so many human situations that do not have a cut and dried answer. They only have principles, right? Um, yeah, a person's privacy does deserve consideration, but the truth also deserves consideration. Um, I mean, to bring up another novel, but in Pride and Prejudice, the true character of Mr. Wickham is discovered to several of the primary characters. Um, let's just say early in the novel, and they decide in prudence that he does not, while they have knowledge of it, they see no reason to make it known to the wider community, their village, their community, and they decide not to. They decide to keep it to themselves. And that silence on their part allows him to continue some of the misdeeds that lead to tragedy later in the novel. And
that's the struggle.
it's the tragedy of it.
I don't want to be responsible for allowing a situation to continue,
Mm-hmm.
but I also don't want to be responsible for slandering someone unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And I think in like the Boromir and Aragorn situation, you know, Boromir's ultimate rejection of his sins, so
Uh-huh.
to speak,
Sure.
it's probably the reason why Aragorn didn't share.
Mm-hmm.
But if Boromir had survived
Mm-hmm.
and not repented,
Right.
he probably would have shared
Someone
in
needs
order to prevent a bad thing from happening.
right. Someone needs to know that Boromir
But I can't think that I would know what Aragorn would say because he's smarter than me.
Oh man, he's the man. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's the man.
quite the boss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that part of the story must happen early on in the Two Towers, right? Yeah.
It's the end of the Fellowship.
It's the end of the Fellowship arc. I think the Fellowship itself doesn't it, but I think the Fellowship itself like ends like right as Aragorn needs to decide to like dash off towards the sound of the horn or dash off like after Frodo or something like that. All right, call up a homeschooler. We need to clarify this.
You're making me wonder now. I think
Yeah.
that whole thing,
Mm.
that whole thing happens in the Fellowship.
Does it? All right. We'll have to go.
Because I recently revisited the books.
Really?
And a lot more takes place in the Fellowship before Two Towers begins
Okay.
in the books than it does in the movies,
Okay.
as I remember it.
Yeah. I listened to Fellowship on audio relatively recently, but but relatively recently. It's already a couple of years already. Yeah, time flies. So
It does.
what's the you must have had some personal experiences of trying to decide, hey, how much do I say, that has given some force to this question in your mind?
Yeah. I don't know. It just from time to time I wonder
Mm.
what the right course of action is, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess I tend to go back to part of the thing that weighs into it for me is, has this person actually, like, the situation that's taking place, does it specifically and directly involve me,
Mm.
or am I just aware of it tangentially?
Mm.
Well, if that's the right course of action.
Do you feel like this becomes a pretty acute question inside marriages? Should a husband be completely open with his wife? Should a wife be completely open with her husband?
So I said earlier tonight that you can't lie,
Mm-hmm.
and that's obvious. We shouldn't be lying.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do lying.
Mm.
Brings up another interesting point. So when you're talking about your spouse,
Yeah.
I think they have, as a spouse,
Mm.
they have the highest level of access to your life.
The highest claim on your
They,
candidness.
yes,
Candor. Yeah.
they have the highest level of security clearance
Mhm.
possible.
Mhm.
Like, they are obliged to know the most explicit details that maybe they haven't even asked. Okay, so an example, like, um, if someone asks you a question, you give them the answer, right? If you don't want this person to know the answer, you can answer the question, well,
Obliquely.
obliquely.
Mm.
Like, if they're asking the wrong question,
Mm.
you can answer the question that they asked,
Mm.
right? To your benefit,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't ask the right question.
Like, does this just make me look fat?
I'm not sure about that. That's not exactly what I mean. Um, like, if your wife asks you, here's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
If your wife asks you, "Hey, did you buy a gun today?" Oh, I bought one yesterday, not today.
Mm.
She asked me that question. I could say, "No, I didn't." That would be honest.
Hmm.
That would not be lying in any way,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
So if your brother asks you that question
Hmm.
and you don't want him to know how many guns you have,
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, did you buy a gun today? I said, no, I didn't.
Hmm.
If your wife asks you that question, did you buy a gun today
Yeah.
when you bought it yesterday?
Right.
I feel like you're obliged to tell her,
Mm.
no, I didn't buy it today. I bought it yesterday.
Hmm. Right. Context
But
counts.
no, yeah. It's well, no, it's who you're answering.
Hmm.
So your wife is obliged to know because she is you.
Right.
You are bound to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So even though she's not asking the right question,
Mm.
she deserves the right answer.
Ah.
Where other people are not obliged to that level of information about your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the, you know, quintessential college stump when the Nazis knock on your door and ask you about the Jews in your attic.
Mm-hmm.
You tell them or not.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any right to know how many Jews you have in your attic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty open to most any answer to that question that's not the truth. But and there's people that fill the entire spectrum between those two things, between your wife and the Nazi SS officer, right?
Sure.
If it's your wife, you're obliged to divine like what she wants to know
Right.
and give her that info.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have no right to the information, then you can tell them whatever you want.
Would that exclude a lie though?
That's the question. Because as I'm not a theologian, but
Mm.
I wonder if the lie requires the person asking to be someone who deserves the truth or something like that.
Mm.
Like there are people I feel like there's some theological honesty here. Like if the person deserves the truth, you give them not only the truth, but even more truth than they thought they would get from you if they deserve that. And if there are people in the middle, if there's any doubt or whatever, then you give them the truth. But if they obviously are not people that deserve the truth for one reason or another, can you even lie to them? That might be the way to say it. Because I feel like the way we were taught is like the mental reservation. So if the Nazi officer says, "Are there any Jews in your attic?" then you can answer, "No, sir, there are no Jewish dogs in my attic."
Sure. Sure.
Come on, bro. Like that was basically a lie. Like you were speaking literally of
Jewish.
Jewish canines,
Yeah.
which there are none of those.
Hmm.
But you basically lied to him. Like if you ask your son, "Did you brush your teeth tonight?" or "Did you brush your teeth?" "Son, did you brush your teeth?" And he says, "Yes, daddy." And his mental reservation is that he brushed them yesterday and not today. Like you would accuse him of lying to you, right? Because the intent,
Yeah.
like the objective of your question was not answered, honestly. So that was a mental reservation according to the way that we were taught lying. That would count as legal. But
Yeah.
that tastes bad. That doesn't pass the sniff test. Right?
Because the bad guys will weaponize your virtue for their ends. That happens all the time.
Mhm.
Every movie. Oh, I'm gonna kill the innocent people so you don't stop me. So they always weaponize your virtue to get away with something. And the thing is like it'll always come back to bite them later. But then I guess that's the question is, I guess maybe the question is the situation. I guess maybe the real question is, God's the arbiter of what morality is. Can you actually change that morality for what you think is a better end? So, if, let's say you have the option of like lying, in your mind, the lie to stop this bad person will result in a better end. And in your mind, they don't have the knowledge to know because they do bad things.
You don't have the right to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
In God's world, telling a lie results in bad things because it's not what morality is. So then it's like, are you do you have the ability to be the arbiter of that morality decision then? Or are you just making up your own rule to find what you think is a better thing than what actually is?
That's a really good question.
I don't think I have the
I don't know the answer.
tools to
Like that's a really compelling way to put it. Like you can't yeah, I'm pretty clear on that. Like you can't do what you think is right in defiance of what God has told you is right. But can one really be blamed for doing something that's obviously sounds like such a heathen thing to say? Like the Nazis standing at your door and you say, "Are there any Jews in your attic?" And you say, "Yes." He's gonna go kill them all.
Those Jews
Can
might
you,
end up wishing they'd found a different attic.
can you expect any reasonable person to make that answer?
Well, there's
Expecting God to come and save them when the person could have done something about it? Oh, here's
great
the answer.
question.
You say, "Yeah, but you're gonna have to kill me first." I guess that's what you say, and then just die along with them.
Well, it's funny you bring this example because my mom actually told me about a story where there was a Jew in a house, and they asked, "Are there any Jews in the house?" And the kid there said, "Yes, he's under the table."
Hmm.
And the Nazi officers couldn't believe it. No way, he wouldn't hide there, and they left. And the kid told the truth, and they saved the Jew.
Hmm.
So then you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Oh, interesting. I heard
yeah."
this was like Corey Ten Boom or something, but it was like there was a hatch beneath a rug underneath the table, something. This is the way my mom told me the story was that there was a
Oh,
hatch to a hidden, to a hidden place in the floor, which was underneath the rug, which was underneath the table. So the kid said, "Oh, he's under the table," because to the kid's mind, they had crawled underneath the table and then gone down this hatch.
oh,
And so,
interesting.
yeah. So anyway, that was that's so funny. Yeah. But I heard basically the same story growing up as a kid. Was that like the Lord works through faithfulness to virtue. I don't think that satisfies the question because you can always come up with a scenario in which it really
I
is a case of telling the truth or allowing harm.
I like um that answer of works through faithfulness to virtue.
Mm-hmm.
Um I feel like if you work hard enough at being virtuous, then the answer will be there for you
Mm-hmm.
in the end. And I have said that prayer many times.
Many times.
Like if I'm going to a situation, I'm like, I don't know what I would do if this is the situation.
Yeah.
Please don't let it be this.
Right. Right.
Like I can deal with this thing and this other thing, but if it's that, I just don't. I don't want to have to do that.
Usually you mentioned that.
Give me
'Cause,
prudence.
yeah, I heard, I don't know who said it. I think it was a priest I read. Was talking about, those, they give you those weird scenarios of like save 100 people or save 200 people. Which one's a better call? Or usually they do like 100 kids or 100 adults, which is the better call.
Mm.
And the priest, I think, said that you can't make that call arbitrarily. You have to be there in the situation with all the factors in place, because all those factors in place is what's going to tell you what is the prudent decision.
Mhm.
I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So it kind of takes that arbitrariness of what's worth more life, what's a better life in either case. It's like, well, they're all important. So then it's like the prudence will come into the situation at hand and play.
Yeah, I think another way to say it is like to a certain extent, it's not really worth your time pondering these philosophical traps, like literally traps.
Yeah, you can't.
It's more worth your time to pray and build your spiritual life. And then when the time comes, if you find yourself in one of these weird situations, just say, "Dear God, I hope this is the right choice. Please help me.
Mm.
Here I go." And then just wing it. along with along with a completely sincere prayer for help. And I think that's the answer.
I remember Father Bob, the first president, talking to us how when he was in college in the 70s, it was very popular to talk about these scenarios. You're in a lifeboat, you only have 6 days worth of supplies, and there's an engineer, a sailor, a pregnant woman, and a doctor, but there's only enough supplies. That it's a 7-day trip to the nearest island, and you only have 4 days of supplies if everyone stays on board. So who do you throw off, right? And there was all sorts of scenarios like this, and it was really an exercise in meaningless arguments, because when are we going to actually find ourselves in any of these specific scenarios without a whole host of other specifics that do then guide our prudence? But praying for prudence doesn't have the academic sex appeal of playing God and deciding who has the most intrinsic worth of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Like well, both as a cop and a firearms instructor, one of my least favorite questions is if a bad guy comes here and does this, can I shoot him?
Mm.
I'm like, I don't know. More information is needed.
Mm.
That's always the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you give me 3 pieces of data, how am I supposed to answer a question when there's 9,000 other spots in this formula that need to be filled with info first?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a stupid question.
It's a lazy question in that it's asking for a level of clarity that has to be patiently, that has to be sought out in the specific instance.
Yeah, I think it demonstrates the laziness of the person asking the question.
Mm.
Like, you just think about this question. Like, go home and think about this for a little bit first
Mm.
before you ask me. Like, why are you just looking for a reason to shoot someone?
Some people are.
Yeah. And in that case, why are you even asking?
Mm. Yeah, they want absolution ahead of the time.
Like, if you're truly asking from an academic or legal moral perspective, like why is this a question? What information do I have that you're not privy to? why do you shoot people? It's generally to preserve the life of an innocent person or someone less innocent than the other person involved. So if you're asking me if you can shoot someone for breaking into your car, like you've obviously not considered this very well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's your car, it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to shoot someone because they're breaking into your car that's parked on the street and you're in your house, you're
Mm-hmm.
not even anywhere close to it, you're not threatened in this situation at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone asks me, can I shoot someone if they walk into my yard when I have a no trespassing sign? Like, are you retarded? No, you can't shoot someone for trespassing. Or even if you could, if it was legally justifiable, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sounds
I
like
didn't want to get like dive straight into the deep stuff again. I was just thinking of it because
Mm.
like you can't these really difficult questions can really only be answered when there's a lot more data being evaluated. And when you
Right.
just give me 2 or 3 data points
And ask you to
this
pontificate.
this isn't a viable discussion.
Mm.
Like we don't know.
Right.
In real life, there's just so many other things that can be involved. It doesn't matter.
Which is why you have this is why you try to give anyone you train principles, right? The
Yeah.
principle is we shoot to defend the life of the innocent.
Pretty much.
Apply that principle to the extremely complex and in a certain way unimaginable scenario that you are currently trying to cook up in your head.
Yeah.
Right.
You shoot to defend innocent life, and you darn well better not have put those innocent lives in that situation in the beginning.
Right. Right. Yep. Right. He's running at me. Should we shoot him? Well, we're on top of a 3-story balcony. We're probably going to be fine. Huh. Wow. Oh, well, Jake, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we only got half of what we need to talk about, but I appreciate being able to drill into some things in a little more detail. And I really hope we can have you back here in the near future and dig into more of the questions that got brought up.
Yeah, I'm around.
Yeah, you're we know where to find you. Yeah. We'll come up with some trigger event for Jake coming back on the podcast. You know?
Can I bring up one more point?
Yeah, man.
So when the prepping thing and like trying to bring in information about what's going on,
Mm.
read the news or whatever,
Yeah.
it can be really discouraging.
Sure.
Especially like who do you trust? Who's working for you? Who's against you? Who are the enemies? Who are the good guys? Are there any good guys?
Mm.
All that kind of stuff can be really overwhelming. And I've been discussing with myself a thing, which is none of it matters. Like none of it matters. People spend all this time talking about politics and sports and all this kind of junk. None of it freaking matters. What matters? What's the important part? We get to heaven.
Mm.
We get those people who are responsible to heaven.
Mm.
And then anyone else you can tag on the way. Right? So just do that and don't worry about the rest of it.
Mm.
Like let the stupid people play their stupid games, and then you just live your life. Live your good life, follow Christ, drag along those people that you can hold on to.
Mm.
Get to heaven, get those people with you that you're
Right.
responsible for.
And consider the lilies of the field. Yeah. Who neither sow nor reap.
Yeah. Provide for the so I had it down into like 4 points.
Okay.
So like that's the first one is like get to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
bring along those you're responsible for.
Right.
Number 2 is like provide for those until then.
Mm-hmm.
and build the best life you can
Yeah.
for those people that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
Provide for them food, water, shelter, security.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, have hobbies that support numbers 1 and 2.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right. I like that. I see that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 4 is execute anything in your life that doesn't support 3, 2, and 1.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's all that matters. I think.
Right. Right. To what extent are other things distracting from 1, 2, and 3? Get rid of those.
Yeah.
Make sure that, yeah, make sure that your daily activities are supporting 1 and 2.
Nice.
And when you have discussions about like politics in America and stuff like that, it's like America's not the country it used to be, and this is really sad, and we need to fight for a better country.
Hmm.
I would agree with those things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you fail, can you be a Catholic? Well, can you be an authentic follower of Christ in communist China?
It's been done before.
Or name your totalitarian dictatorship of choice.
My HOA.
Yeah. Like where you are, the country that you inhabit, the regime you've been born into,
Mm-hmm.
the time and history that you live in, none of that really has any bearing on your ability to follow Christ to the best of your ability based on the knowledge and gifts that you have. So none of that really matters in the end, right? It's more comfortable to live in a free country,
Yeah,
but it's not like freedom is not a predicate of holiness.
I think yes, I agree with that. I think I would want to say something like the environment, the specific environment into which you're born into does not change the mission, right? It does not change what we're called to, right? Whether we're Alexander Solzhenitsyn growing up in
And you could make the
communist
argument
environment.
that it doesn't play into your success rate either.
Hmm.
It
I don't
definitely plays
know.
into your comfort rate,
Yep, I
but
agree.
comfort is not the end goal.
No, comfort's not the end goal.
How many martyrs come out of China versus the United States?
We don't know.
We don't.
We don't know.
But you wouldn't be crazy if you thought that it would be pretty high.
Don't know. I think I would agree with some thinkers that say if you want to raise your children, be able to teach them and be able to provide for their greatest overall happiness, the environment in which they grew up does matter. Certainly there were wonderful examples of martyrdom in communist Russia. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there were also hundreds of millions of people who never heard about the faith, who were never exposed to the faith, who never had a chance to encounter something very real because the state had suppressed the church, right? I do think that can be said to be objectively worse than a free country in which you can practice religion.
Yes. So I don't want to downplay people's suffering or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously better to live in a free country, in
Mm-hmm.
a free society
Mm.
without persecution and where all of your basic human needs are easily met. It's obviously better in all ways. But that's number 2.
Sure.
It's not number 1.
Mm.
Number 1 is be faithful, get to heaven, follow Christ. And that can be done no matter what society you live in.
Mm. Yes, and we shouldn't mistake
So don't
number
be
2
discouraged.
for number 1.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the prepper thing that I was talking about earlier. Like, it's important, to provide for your family,
Mhm.
like practice security things, be skilled,
Sure.
all this, but the end goal is not to just survive forever.
Mm-hmm.
The end goal is to get to heaven and be one with God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say don't, number one, be faithful, get to heaven, drag along those you're responsible for. Don't be discouraged by the state or potential apparent state of things around you,
Right.
because no matter those, you can still do or try to do number one. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to dig into that next time, but
We will have to do number one.
that's kind of where I landed after hearing some podcasts and some stuff. I was like, I don't know who to trust. I don't know what's real. What's going on around me? Well, you know what? Don't worry about it.
Hmm.
You have a life. You have a family. You have a faith. You've got work to do. Affect what you're able to affect here, and let the crazy people play their crazy games. It doesn't take away your power. Part of the goal of the crazies is to make you feel powerless so that you just follow them mindlessly.
Mm. That you accept the
But
environment they create.
don't fall into that. You know, I tend to be interested in conspiracy theories and stuff like that, but you know, if it steals your peace from day to day and it makes you feel powerless and hopeless, then it's not benefiting you.
Mm.
You know, gather information that will help you make choices to the benefit of your family and your community. But if it gets to the point where you're going crazy and you're feeling hopeless and you're contemplating wild things, then maybe it's time to reevaluate what's important in life, which is get to heaven.
Right.
Provide for those who are around you. Do fun things, have hobbies that promote those things. And then kill off your vices. Freaking execute those vices. And that's a good life. And you can live that life regardless of where you are in space or time. The end.
Yeah. I agree with that. All right. Well, man, we're going to have you back on. This was fun.